Hello and welcome to Ask an Author with Julia Kelly. I am so excited because today I have a debut author with me. Denny, would you like to introduce yourself and your book?
Hi, Denny S. Bryce here. Thank you so much for having me, Julia. I really appreciate the opportunity to be out here talking about wild women in the blues. This is my debut novel. That means the very first time I've been published, and I'm, thrilled. It's historical fiction told in a dual storyline. That means I have a story happening in 1925 about an ambitious showgirl by the name of, or chorus girl, excuse me, not a showgirl, there's a difference, an ambitious chorus girl. Her name is Honorée Dalcourt. And then in the 2015 storyline, a young man who is a film student. He's grieving over a loss, and he wants to finish one thing to get his life back on track. So he finds a box of old items in his grandmother's attic. In that box, the long ago box, he finds a reel of film and a bunch of photos of Oscar Micheaux, who is the legendary Black filmmaker and the subject matter of his graduate thesis, with a woman who, on the back of the photos, her name and a telephone number. So he says, well, let me call this number and see if someone knows her. And it turns out it's a senior living facility. And in that senior living facility is a 110-year-old Honorée Dalcourt. So, the two stories sort of come together with that dual storyline, helping it move along.
Well, I loved this book and am very, very happy to shout about it to everybody. But one of the things that I really loved about it was how much wonderful detail you capture in 1925. And then, of course, those details follow us through to present day and going through the story that unfolds there. So I thought perhaps we'd start in the past. And
Okay.
can you tell me a little bit about who the woman that we meet at the center of this story is? You say she's ambitious, which she definitely is. And one of the things I love about her is she knows what she wants and she's going for it.
Mm-hmm.
What is her Honorée? What is she trying to do with her life?
She has a strong survival instinct. She is on her own at 19, has been on her own for 3 years, and she is someone who has always had the dream of glamour in her life. And she realized that she had this talent and nurtured this talent, and then decided, well, this is going to be the train, if you will, for a metaphor, the train that's going to get me out of this particular situation. The situation that she's in is she's working full time at a rather seedy speakeasy and called Miss Hattie's Cafe. And she wants to move on up to State Street, that great street. And that's something that Chicago people would say. And a place called the Dreamland Cafe. So she's, it's somewhat of a coming of age story in a way, but at the same time, because it's interesting to me that from anytime I do research in that time period, a 19-year-old is pretty much in charge of their lives. And at that, it's just a different type of atmosphere. I also wanted to definitely tell a story of a young African-American woman in the Black Belt of Chicago during the Roaring 20s, and showcase her determination to achieve what she wants to achieve. But at the same time, she still has a real, I feel, sensitive heart that she buffers to keep herself focused. So I think that's an answer to your question.
I think it's a very good answer. Well, it's so interesting that you say it's a coming of age story because it is. And it's not just her age, which I agree. I think especially when you're looking at the 1920s and women who, she's because of circumstances, has been on her own for a long time, she would have had to grow up very quickly. But there's sort of another level of growing up that she goes through during this book. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about her is that she becomes, I think, in some ways tougher and in some ways a bit softer and more vulnerable in different complementary ways, which I think is wonderful because it just makes her such a rich, complex character, as this really exciting, somewhat glamorous, somewhat gritty sometimes story is unfolding around her.
Yeah, yeah. And her willingness to embrace and not shy away from the different circumstances and obstacles that she faces, even though she sometimes, every now and then, doubts herself. But mostly she's sort of like a steamroller. She's just going to keep going. She's going to keep going. And that means, as with many steamrollers, you sometimes roll over the wrong thing. And so that's where the coming of age, where you start to see more of a fully rounded person. And then you have the juxtapositioning of Sawyer Hayes, who is the young man in the present day story who is battling back to a place of confidence from a place of not that much confidence. And he has someone in his ear who is challenging him on different levels. Mm-hmm. And that someone is Honoré Dalcourt.
She kind of comes around full circle with this story and is a wonderfully lucid, very, very sassy 110-year-old. She does not suffer anything.
Yeah. Well, she's inspired. What inspired me a little bit about her is my aunt, who is 94, 95 now. And in a conversation with her, or if you were on the phone with her, you'd have no idea of her age. Her voice is very powerful, very strong, very direct. And she is that way, has always been that way. And, very lucid. And so I was like, hey, I can play with this character. And it's not going too far.
Absolutely. I did want to just say we have a comment already from somebody who says, Joanne, who says, I'm up to chapter 45. Don't give away the ending. The story is captivating. We're not going to give away the ending. We've already
no spoilers.
We're going to stay away from spoilers, which can be tricky sometimes, but I think with this one is really important. We want to make sure we keep the twists and the turns and the mysteries, because there is mystery that's shrouded in this one, both in Sawyer's and then also in Honoré's 1925 section as well. So, but sort of before we get too much into mystery, I do want to talk a little bit about the setting and the dancing and the clubs and this world that you've created. But I think maybe we can do that by starting with the description of what it's like to be a dancer. So I don't know if you know this, but I know you mentioned beforehand, and I think in your author's note as well, that you have a dance background. Right. I have a very untrained dance background. So I used to be a swing dancer and a blues dancer. Okay. Able to do that. So I love this. I love this world. I find it fascinating, and I love the music. And I also love the way that the music can make you feel when you're dancing as well. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like writing a character who is a dancer herself and trying to convey what it feels like to kind of have that moment where you connect with the music and it's kind of a joyful thing as well as being her work too?
Well, there are several areas that I thought about as I was writing it. There is the physicality that dancers, former dancers, or anyone who's been, very athletic, I think tennis players, basketball players, the whole gambit of sports requires that you pay attention to your body. And that physicality was something I was enjoying about the character, but not just her. I like having those people in the room fill the space in whatever way their character would sit at a small table. There's a scene where one of the characters playing with coins. He's just doing some, coin tricks, just doing something with his hands, but there's something about his whole physique that is communicating something too, hopefully to the reader, but also to the other character in the scene. The dance sequences, or one thing that I used to say about dancers in general, there are dancers who, when they get on stage, it's just them and the stage. There's almost a wall between them and an audience. Then there are dancers who get on stage and the audience is their energy. Both dancers are excellent, gorgeous presentations of the art form, be it ballet, be it modern dance or jazz. I started, believe it or not, in my youth as a ballet dancer. And at 5'10", at that time period, it was rather difficult to find a partner.
Yeah.
It wasn't, in my world, going to drop me on the ground. So then I moved into modern dance as well. But just that feeling of how an audience either distracts or enhances your feelings about being on the stage. So I enjoyed writing about the stage moments, about the performance moments, but also incorporating that same approach, if you will, to the non-dance moments, because I wanted the reader to get a sense of that physical world, the crowded dance floor, the movement of the bodies as you're trying to have a conversation or whatever.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, because especially in the opening scenes, again, no spoilers, but in the opening scenes when we start in this club and you get a sense of, what is it like there? Because she's moving through the crowd, she's pushing through to trying to get a drink. There's a conversation that happens. People are jostling and bumping each other around. So you really get a sense that these are lively, vibrant places. In some cases, somewhat seedy. In some cases, a bit more upmarket, maybe a bit here. So a little bit about some of the different venues that we look at here. We have Miss Hattie's, and then some other places that we visit.
Well, what's nice about the 1920s and a city like Chicago, you can still find some of those spaces that have been converted into bars or speakeasies or restaurants even, or just going into an old hotel and seeing how something as simple as the ceiling height that I worked in at a couple of bars myself. In Chicago, I worked at a place called the Wise Fools Pub, and it was a blues joint. And just remembering the feeling of waiting on tables and trying to push through a crowd of people who are really enjoying the music and downing the drinks and the whole routine there. And then in New York, when I was dancing in New York, as all good dancers do, I was waiting on tables as well. And one of the places I worked at just had all of that going on, except it was a more upscale, So I've taken those personal experiences and said, okay, I've done my research. I know the feel, if you will, of the space. That's another thing that for me is ceiling height. And when I go into older buildings and things like that and see how small they are in terms of the feeling of the place, and even though you'll see something online about the space and it's like this enormous lobby hotel and you get there and you're like, I am so claustrophobic. Yeah, it's like the ceilings are coming down.
So what about the process of researching some of these places? Because you take us to some, especially if you're a fan of jazz, very recognizable names throughout this book. And we, of course, see some very recognizable faces as well. Can you talk a little bit about your research? And I'm going to leave that very open-ended because I imagine there's loads that you want to talk about.
Well, let me talk to you about the one bit of research that I feel is so exciting is that one of the characters in the book I've actually met. I met her when I was a baby, practically, waiting tables in New York. Her name is Alberta Hunter. Alberta Hunter, the name of the club that we worked at was called The Cookery. Now, The Cookery was in the East Village and owned by a guy named Barney Josephson, who I believed owned Cafe Society back in the day. Because when he came into the club one night, he was definitely in his late 80s, 90s, I don't know. And what was happening at the time with Alberta Hunter was that she was making a comeback in her 80s. And my job was to bring her tea. And before her performance, before she got playing, she played piano and sang. She and I would talk about Chicago, because we were both Chicagoans, and we sort of bonded over that. So that was more an energy, because at the time, I did not really say, oh, there's Alberta Hunter, and I know her from the I didn't know anything. And it sort of just dawned on me as time went on, and I started working on some historical stories. And I said, I used to see her on Friday and Saturday nights. So it was sort of that sort of revelation that came to me at one point in time. But in terms of other concrete research, I'll start by saying I spent a lot of time with librarians and archivists at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago, and also the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Some of the elements of working with archivists are really getting a sense of the collections that are available. And some of those collections can have so much fabulous information. You definitely get into the rabbit hole moment, and you can get lost. The other area that I found that I'm really falling in love with as a researcher for books are maps from the time period that just give you such a sense of space, and floor plans. That's another golden thing. I'm using floor plans quite a bit in my next book because of the homes and the communities that are very different from what you'd find in Chicago in the 1920s. In addition, one of the things that I always do, I'm reaching over for some show and tell. Books like this one, it's called Chicago's New Negro. One of the fundamental things that I always do with research is to learn about the economy of the community that I am going to be talking about. The economics are an important way of understanding the business structure, how much money people made, what that money could buy them. Sure, you can look and get this, that, and the other, but in the African-American community in Chicago, we're talking about a time that was at the beginnings of the Great Migration. Mm-hmm. So you have many African-Americans moving out of the South to escape Jim Crow and severe segregation, going into the North, looking for job opportunities, being encouraged even to travel out of the South by some of the Black press, the Black newspapers, including the Chicago Defender, which I also must mention as a fabulous resource. Its archives, it's one of the oldest Black newspapers in the country. Its archives were absolutely phenomenal in terms of really getting a flavor of the time period. Everything from the apartment listings and the price point for the kitchenettes to the hotels in the area, the businesses on State Street, I mean, there was just so much information, not just the news stories, but also in the classified, that you can give you a real good feel for a time period and things.
You get a sense of how people lived by what they were buying, what they were selling, what they were putting in.
Absolutely. And another joy of the 1920s are there more magazines. And some of those magazines were, especially the women's fashion magazines. It's the early days of Photoplay, which was a big Hollywood, one of the early Hollywood magazines, because they were already, even in the silent film days, putting, their Hollywood actors and actresses on pedestals, so you could read about them and their lives all the time. So it became natural, if you will.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's so interesting that you say that, because a couple of times you mentioned in describing a character, he reminded her of, a boxer or another figure. And I only connected when we were talking now, this would have been really when you start to see a real rise in celebrity culture, right? And you get a universality to those references. So it's not necessarily just regional, sort of, everybody would have known who this person is because that's who that newspaper covered, but you get that film industry and you start to get everything that comes along with it, and sport and all those things. So that's interesting, because it would be sort of a relatively novel experience to have that shared language between people.
Yes, and someone like the boxer Jack Johnson, I believe, was important because he, as an African American boxer, he beat a white boxer, and this became a rally point for the African American community. So the interaction of celebrity and community spirit and was a part of that time period as well. And of course, I mentioned Oscar Micheaux. Oscar Micheaux, a legendary Black filmmaker, was also someone who was not, I mean, there were other Black filmmakers, but he became the most prolific, if you will. And there was a movie that came out in 1915. Oh my goodness, I always forget the name of it. It's called, anyway, it was D.W. Griffith's film. I remember the director, but I can't remember the name of the movie right now. But what it did was characterize African Americans in a very negative way. And the stars of this movie were the Ku Klux Klan. So you have, you know what? Say it again.
Birth of a Nation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I knew we were on the same.
We were closing in on it. And so one of the things that Oscar Micheaux did was to make sure he produced films that were for African American communities, about African Americans and starring African Americans, without having these derogatory characterizations, so that there was an opportunity for the community to enjoy films that were not, absolutely degrading to them as people. So he made a lot of fabulous films, and some of them have been lost. But for example, one of his early films that I talk about in the book, Body and Soul, you can watch on YouTube right now.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Okay. It's on my list of things to do. I love film history, so
isn't it fascinating? Yeah, I'm a big fan of film history, and he just seemed to be a natural for what I was looking to accomplish, Oscar Micheaux, in this film. I mean, in this story.
In some ways, writing about this time in Chicago must be such a gift in some ways, because you have such fascinating characters that can populate sort of real people who enter your stories. Yeah. There will be some very, very familiar jazz musicians in there. And then also you have people based on club owners, and yes. I assume there's some very familiar Chicago faces that pop up also for people who are
at least locations. I didn't want there's definitely a lot of familiar locations, or just locations that people would be, it's like, oh yeah, my grandmother told me about that, or something like that. But I also, of course, Louis Armstrong, who is so well known for the earliest days. I mean, so well known in his time. I think that today there aren't as many people who know. It's been a long time, but he's also had some, jazz has gone through a lot of changes over the last 100 years or so, and the forms of jazz that were popular back then have music has changed so dramatically, but I'm always hopeful that, those things that make jazz music or the different forms of jazz music so popular back in the day and up through the 60s and 70s, if you will return. And you're starting to hear it in a few songs. But
They say everything's cyclical, so maybe.
yeah, everything is cyclical, and it comes back. But one of my favorite characters is Lil Hardin Armstrong. And when I started researching and reading about her, I got very excited because she was a woman who had her own career before she met Louis Armstrong. She was a jazz pianist, was a band leader, a successful band leader, female band leader, and not of an all-female band, but of a band, and in Chicago. So when Louis Armstrong, when she met him and married him, one of the things that she insisted upon when they opened at the Dreamland Cafe was that he be promoted as the greatest trumpet player in the world. That was her call, her decision to make sure that she was sort of his Bengali, if you will, in those early days.
She's a really interesting character because I think one of the things that you realize is throughout this book, this is a very complex neighborhood. There's class stratification within it. There's different people filling different roles. And there's a scene in her home, which is a beautiful home, and she's always impeccably dressed. And there's a fantastic scene involving some mud and things like that with her that I really enjoyed. But she's interesting because she kind of seems to kind of really be this aspirational figure for these girls who are these dancers in these clubs. Can you talk a little bit about the differences in class and how that would have played out, even just within the club scene itself, let alone the neighborhood?
Absolutely. One of the, the story does touch upon colorism and class issues, and the class issues within the African American community had to do with how long a family had been free and in Chicago versus the people who were migrating into the city. And in the early days, pre-World War I, leading into the 20s, you had groups of society, African American society, elite, if you will, who'd been there a long time, who were clashed with some of the people who were migrating up from the South. And so we do touch upon that in the story a little bit, as well as the different club hierarchy and what that would mean with a black and tan versus an all black cafe or speakeasy near, in a certain part of town that would not be frequented by any of the white jazz lovers or people who wanted to go into the clubs for the music. And so there were just layers of community, society, conflict, and then, some other things that came to pass.
Well, again, we're trying to keep this spoiler free, but maybe this is hinting on some other things, but also some of the ambitions of some of these characters as well. Nobody in this book is completely on the side of good or completely on the side of bad. There seems to be a lot of shades of gray here, which I think makes for more complex characters and probably also more realistic characters. Was that a very conscious decision, or did it seem like it was the right thing to do for the characters, the time?
I think it was a combination of definitely something I was doing consciously, but also the characters and their environments, be it Sawyer and his, here's a young man who is a graduate student, Berkeley University or California, whatever the name of the school is. I can't remember right now.
Some combination
And
of
so,
those.
you know, and he had a different, his lifestyle and what he's been exposed to, what his focuses are very middle class, upper middle class, and, or I should say, I don't like to use the word class, income. And in the 1925 story, you're seeing a community that has been mixed up together in terms of the African American community, where money and you know, be it society status and things like that, are all rolled into this this need, or not need, into the limitations of their, of the world that they live in. Because, you know, no matter how much money you had, as an African American in 1925, you could not move to certain parts of the city,
Right.
no matter what, because there were red line orders. They had the athletic clubs that I talk about, where people are coming through, are you know, segregationists and doing all sorts of things. So lifestyle had to match or be tempered by the realities of the world that they were living in. I also like to say that in general, my characters in this story may not have been able to write the world that they lived in, but they conquered the space that they lived in. Wherever they were they were striving for success within the framework of what they were able to grab onto. And so I like that. I don't want to tell a story just about people who are downtrodden, because that is not the only story that needs to be told about the African American community in the 20s.
Well, and I think especially within this context, you do have struggles and hardship from some of these characters, but you have music and excitement and money. And I'm looking at the cover of your book right now. You have such wonderful fashion in this book, and the cover is fabulous as well. And I'm sure
Yes.
I would love
it's there. I was about to grab a book, and then I said, but it's everywhere. I just reach back, and suddenly there's the book.
Very subtly, it's right there.
Yes. And this, I must give credit, because we've gotten a lot of attention for this cover, which has been
fabulous.
But the Kensington cover design, creative director there is Christine Mills, and the cover illustrator is Sarah Knott. And I think this was like the 4th treatment that we saw, but this was the only treatment that we saw of this particular look and feel, and it was an automatic yay team. She just is honorary to me. The angle, you know, you can tell to me, her neckline, her shoulders, the way her arm is just holding the fan is very dancer-esque. Then there's the angle of her neck and the way she's looking down. I say that there's something on this woman's mind, and that really works for me, to say that, you know, she's thinking.
I think
I'm putting too much into the cover now.
You know, there's more going on than just what you're seeing on the cover. There's
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it is incredibly eye-catching, and it's beautiful. And I know when I first saw it, when you had a cover reveal for it, I just thought, oh, I have to read that. And with a name like Wild Women in the Blues, also, which were you the one who came up with the title? Because I'm terrible at coming up with my own titles.
So far, so good. Everything I've put a title to it's been okay. Right. This one is actually, there's a song by a woman named Ida B. Cox, who was a blues singer of that time period, or maybe later. And the name of the song is Wild Women Don't Get the Blues. And so I said, I can play with that, because, and I did. And I just switched out the negative and put it as just a statement of fact.
I like it.
Women who are wild, and then there are the blues.
Yep, exactly. And sometimes they go together.
Sometimes they cross paths, sometimes they don't.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you a little bit about this being your debut book,
Mhm.
what your experience has been like bringing the book out virtually, because we were talking, this is, we're a few weeks into your virtual tour for the book launch. How have you found promoting it through events like this and other digital events?
I have, well, with the pandemic, first and foremost, this has been a great recasting of the book tour process.
Oh, yes.
And it's a new model that I imagine will continue in some format. I had an event last night where there were actually people in the bookstore and on Zoom.
Oh,
And
that,
what they've done is put a big screen in the bookstore so that people could be spaced out, wearing their masks. So we had an audience and an audience.
that's
And
interesting.
it was fun. It was absolutely fun because you really felt it was like, I wonder how big, and we didn't have to look at the screen at all, but I wonder how big the screen is. But so it was really a way of addressing the potential transition
Mhm.
as things improve nationwide, so that maybe by fall, winter, we're going to be seeing more people in the stores, in the bookstores, as well as on screen. The other thing that has happened because of the pandemic is even dating back, well, my book changed release dates 3 times.
Oh, I didn't
Uh,
realize that.
yeah, originally it was supposed to come out in September 2020. Then it had a date in late December 2020, and then it moved to 2021. Um, and I was in a group of a Facebook group of debut authors. And what's amazing about the 2020 group and the 2021 group, you have these authors who are definitely open and communicating with each other, talking about their challenges, talking about their successes, sharing information. And it really created a resource that was so important. And I think many of us will say this, that has helped us navigate what has been a very different, journey for a debut author in the last 18 months, or how it feels like 18 months. Has it been that long? It's almost. It's
Sounds
been a
like
while.
yeah,
Just keeps
yeah.
going on and on. But so from that perspective, the debut author experience has been as positive as it possibly could be. I've been very excited about the ongoing support from these communities, as well as in general, authors support authors.
Yeah.
And that's also very nice. That's you don't always get that in my old corporate days, but yeah, it's nice.
It's one of the interesting things, kind of seeing readers' feedback on Facebook Lives that I've been doing for Ask an Author, and just um, obviously you have to be careful not just to support your friends. As an author, you need to open things up and make sure you are, helping other people as well. But it's wonderful to see how readers respond to that goodwill between authors, and finding out,
Yeah.
you may not necessarily be the best of friends because maybe you've just met, but there's a sense of, kind of, if I can do anything for you, or come on this show, or do this thing, or refer you to this thing, or, and it's nice to see that, and it's nice to hear that throughout the pandemic, when I think it's even more needed, because publishing really did, quite frankly, had no idea what was going to happen around this
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
thought, do is the industry going to just grind to a halt? What's going to happen? And so I think hearing that people have pulled together is really heartening, and I hope that continues. Especially for me, selfishly, I like doing things like this, so I'm happy
Yeah.
people keep doing digital events so that we have these
I'm
conversations.
enjoying the digital events because they also give readers an option to see more. of us, then they would, not everybody can go to every event, and not every author makes it to every market. So this is really, that's why I continue to expect a remodeling, a new model for the book tour that will continue to incorporate the virtual tour. Some element of that will always be there. I think readers will demand it. So that means it'll happen.
They should. Absolutely.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't want to put on a bra and shoes. You want to just sit, in the comfort of your home and watch it.
All we're doing is right up here.
I'm wearing slippers right now, for full disclosure. So, but no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm hoping that this continues in some form. I do have to ask, how has it been writing now that you have a book out in the world, or that you've known that you're going to have a book out in the world, which I know is a very different thing than being an unpublished author who's writing a voice book.
Yes, because I have another book that will be coming out in April of 2022.
Congratulations.
Another historical fiction. It's called Blackbirds. And it's another dual timeline set in 1928 and 1968. The 1928 storyline takes place in Los Angeles. Hollywood is definitely a backdrop, as well as a luxury hotel. And in 1968, it's a road trip from Chicago to LA, where some characters are traveling during the first week of June of 1968. So it's gonna, now to writing that book, it's about to go into a revision mode. So I'm anxious to get back to a routine of writing. I'm looking forward to it because I miss it. The last month in particular has been very busy with the launch, and I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to be busy with the launch.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah. So there's no problems really, but just learning to manage your schedule more effectively and more productively is definitely part of my new regimen, if you will.
And it's always a process with every book. You never know what one book is going to demand. Literally, I had a book that I could not write except at 5 o'clock in the morning. I wish it hadn't have been that. I wish it would have been a different way.
Yeah.
But that's how it got done.
That's the way it can. Yeah, I'm a big 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. writer. And that's, sometimes I'm just like, I wish I could sleep. And I just get up and do it. And then I don't sweat it. And then I write full time. So it's okay to be so, indulgent as not to sleep.
Schedules.
Yeah.
I like it. Can you talk a little bit more about that book that is coming out in April 2022? Are we really that far through the?
Yeah, sometimes I think I forget that it's 21. So a year from this month, Blackbirds will be coming out. It's, as I said, I can't say a lot about it. It's some scenes from the book Blackbirds are in the back of the Wild Women in the Blues. I almost forgot. It's like, how many books you got going here? Which one are we talking about? But I'm excited about this book because of the story it's going to be telling about a woman who comes of age in the late 1920s, but then has this life and these issues that lead her back to LA later in life with another young woman who is escaping something in her life at that point in time, and how they bond and their relationship. in that 1968 story, with the backdrop of a very politically charged time. I mean, 1968 began with the Tet Offensive, and I think ended with men going to the moon. That was sort of and you had assassinations, the death of Martin Luther King, you had the death of Robert F. Kennedy, you had riots, you had so much going on in 1968. That have some serious similarities to some of the issues and upheaval that has been happening in our country in the last couple of years. So looking at 68 in its political capacity and what it was doing, and in 1928, what was going on in Los Angeles, but also that Hollywood scene that always infuses just another layer of just fun and nonsense. That's what I like to call it.
I mentioned I'm a big fan of film history. I'm also a native Angelino, so I'm very excited for this book, because one of the things that I wish you saw more was Los Angeles as a backdrop for historical fiction. And I'm getting bits and pieces of it through film, but I haven't seen 1928. I'm seeing a lot of sort of the 50s, sort of the golden age of Hollywood, but that early days of Hollywood when it was wild. And it was just completely, they were making it up as they went along and having a really good time doing it.
Had a great time. One of the characters, Rudolph Valentino, had just passed, I think, in a little bit before 28. And he had like an endless number of cashmere suits. And I'll say no more than one of my characters in 1928 buys all of his clothes.
All of the clothes.
Wow. All of his clothes.
That would be something, wouldn't it?
Yes, it was. It's a little creepy though, if you think about it. The dead man's clothes. I must have them. They can't go to waste. but Hollywood was in its glory in a way, because you had one of the big producers of that time, or directors, was King Vidor. MGM was, have you ever, if you lived in Los Angeles, had you ever gone to Culver City's Culver City Hotel? No. The Culver City, it is amazing. It was built in 1925. And it's still on the second floor of the hotel. It has a museum of sorts, talking about the hotel's earliest days. And the shape of it is very reminiscent of the time period. And it's not the hotel. I don't want to mention the hotel where my action takes place, but this hotel is definitely a part of the fabric, the landscape of Hollywood back in the day.
Okay, I'm excited about this. I'll have to keep an eye on for it.
We got time. Come on.
I know you don't have a huge amount of free time at the moment, I imagine, with launching a book and writing and all these things, heading into revisions. But are you getting much reading done these days? Is there anything that you've been
yeah, because I must read. I just, there's too much going on right now. I'm going to reach up and just grab, I'm into show and tell again. I'll grab two books that are handy that I'm reading or about to read. Actually, I've started this one because I see the bookmark. This is Black Butt by Fabulous. Ooh, very nice, very nice. This one is on my TBR, but I definitely want to grab. This is Band of Sisters by Lauren Willig. I am looking forward to being able to settle into that. I have tons of books in my house, and the thing is that I moved here recently in August of 2020, but I've been so busy that I haven't put up my bookshelves yet. So I have just stacks of books all through the house.
See you right here. Well, this is actually just my books, but
right.
I was telling you before we started, I'm having bookshelves built right now. So I'm literally living in the middle of stacks of books until these books go up. So they're supposed to be finished tomorrow evening. And I think I might have a really wild Friday of pouring a glass of wine and sorting through my books.
Oh my God. I don't know when I'm going to put up these bookcases or these book. I have bookcases that are out in the other room, but the office just needs to be every wall needs to be lines of bookcases.
How else could
So
you?
we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It will get done. It will get done.
It'll get done. I know it will, because eventually I can't, a stack of books is going to fall on me and knock me out. So I got to get them I got to get them out of the way.
Exactly. Well, and at some point, more books are going to be coming in, because I have no doubt that if you are not already inundated with requests to blurb people's books, I'm sure have no.
I just finished my first blurb.
Congratulations. That's a milestone.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Very awesome to have that opportunity, most definitely.
Yeah. Well, so if you guys are watching and you're not aware, authors often get asked to comment on somebody's book, and that's the lovely cover quote that you get, or on the backs of the covers, and it can be really, really fun, especially I think when those requests first start coming.
And an honor too to have someone ask, most definitely. And so I'm very excited about that one, but I also have a lot of reading to do for the book reviews that I do for NPR. And that's a whole different type of reading, of course, that requires, and since I am a slow reader, requires a lot of focus, because when I'm reviewing a book, I slow down a little bit more, because I really want to take in everything. And if I'm going to write about it and provide a good critique review, I want to absorb the whole thing as much as possible. So
have you found, and I know we're running short on time here, but I am curious about this reviewing side of things, because you review for NPR and you've also written for some other places. Do you find that it's a different process, kind of going through and doing that?
Oh, yes, it's a far different process than anything else I write is when I do a book review, because the goal is to, well, first, no spoilers, and then you want to recap to a certain extent what are the main storyline, what's the main storyline of the book, but you also want to hit the takeaway for the reader. Like, what are the themes that are recurring in the story? What are the characterizations that resonate on different levels, be it for a reader who is interested in rom-com versus a reader who is interested in historical fiction that might be more commercial, or literary story. So being able to digest that, what's happening, and your interpretation of what the author is seeking to accomplish, is a different kind of reading to me, and also an analysis, more of an analysis. And it's not the same kind of analysis that you are capable of, or at least I'm not capable of doing with my own work, because that is, it really is a step away.
Yeah,
it's several steps away, and you're looking at it only from a global, and then you can sort of dive in certain points to really dig into this, because you also are wanting to communicate to the reader, this is something you will want to read, and these are the discoveries that'll potentially touch you, without giving anything away.
Task, I imagine.
Yeah, because there's a point where you just say, oh, I'm done. You can't write any more about it, because the next word on the page is going to give something away, and that's the last thing. Well, my editor would never let me do that. She's fabulous. So I don't have to worry about that too much.
Wonderful. What's
Yeah.
it's so interesting about hearing about all these different areas of what you're doing, and I'm so excited for the people to discover
Oh,
Wild
thank
Women of Blues, and I'm excited for my own sake of getting what I'm sure will be a great Los Angeles based historical fiction. This is going to be
you. Yay. Yes, as soon as it's revised.
yeah, well, yes, I
Yeah,
know there's
we
steps
know
along
how
the
that
way,
happens.
so but you'll get there.
Yes.
You'll get there.
Hmm.
Wonderful. Well, perhaps you could, in wrapping up, you could tell people where they can find you on the internet and
Oh,
if you'd like to
absolutely.
follow along and find your books.
Well, I'm easy to find because my website, DennySBryce.com, has all of the links to my Instagram, my Facebook, and Twitter accounts, and Tumblr and TikTok and whatever else I can stumble through. My book is available everywhere books are sold. So I'm very excited about that. Independent bookstores nationwide, in addition to the usual culprits, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, um, you know, Amazon. So it's everywhere. Yay. So find it, and hopefully you're interested in exploring historical fiction in Chicago during the Jazz Age in the 1920s, as well as 2015 Chicago, and a little taste of Honoré Dalcourt at 110 and Honoré Dalcourt at 19.
It's a wonderful story in both parts. So I'm very excited for more people to be
Oh,
reading it and to
thank
follow the
you.
rest of your tour. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.